AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host, Mark Kelly, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
Our guest today is Noah Gift. Noah is the founder of Pragmatic AI Labs, and he's also a lecturer at UC Davis. Welcome to the show, Noah.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Noah, tell us a little about your background and how you actually got interested in machine learning and AI.
So my background is a little bit unusual in that I was originally working at Caltech when I first got it started in the industry. And when I was at Caltech, it was the AI winter still. This was about 2000. And a lot of the people that I was friends with happened to be PhD students or neuroscientists. It's a very small community. We would play ultimate frisbee at lunch and just have, really unusual conversations. I got to learn Python while I was there, just through peer pressure. I mean, it was just, and that's one of the great things about having a really small community like that. And then fast forward to today, and many of those people are actually quite a big deal in the AI field. I did work for Dr. David Baltimore, who was the president of Caltech, and at the time I think he got a Nobel Prize in his 30s, which is also very unusual. So there's just yeah. So there's a lot of really that had a pretty big impact, I think, in terms of being interested in AI, because neuroscience at the time, in a way, it was AI was dead except for those people. And one of my really good friends at the time, who's since passed away, was this guy named Dr. Joseph Bogan. He had done the first hemispherectomy, which was back when they did hemispherectomies, which is removing half of the brain. It was a kind of a last-ditch effort to stop really bad epileptic seizures, and so he had some really interesting thoughts about the origins of consciousness, and that's why he was involved with Christoph Koch's lab. And so there was neural networks were something that I had been familiar with, before I guess they were really that commonly talked about. And that really was maybe the kindling of my interest in AI and machine learning.
Okay, great. So you came from a nice ecosystem as well, and it's really kind of flourished. Tell us a little bit about the stuff that you did with Score Sports and how you got involved with prediction sports and kind of social media engagement. And because again, that's a pretty fascinating area, but not many people are particularly interested in it years ago. What kind of gave you that foresight to get into it?
So when I joined Score Sports, this was, I think, 2013 and really we'll just call it like the first technical employee, or one of the first technical employees, and I was hired as a CTO. And we had some experiments before that, but there was not any established technology. And so I worked with a small team of people, and we built a fantasy app and a sports social network over the course of about a year. So we're, the typical thing you would do in the Bay Area, MVP, launch it, try to build some disruptive technology. At a high level, we were trying to be the Facebook of sports, right? So really carve out sports from social media. And if you look at today, like some of the things that have happened with Facebook, people would have been much more receptive to that, in that a lot of Facebook has political, and there's some people that just want to talk about sports. They don't want any of that.
Yeah.
So really that was the emphasis. But in order to grow to the next level, what we had to do was we had to figure out ways to do growth hacking. And so one of the ace cards we had was an American football player called Brett Favre, who was one of the top quarterbacks of all time. he was on our board, and he was actually posting content, and he was really the first big celebrity, and we saw that there was like a wave throughout social media when he would post. So he would post something on Facebook or Twitter, and then it would have this big repercussion on our site. That was our, the thought process was, well, let's see if we can find other people like that, and then capture those signals and then turn that into a way of getting exponential growth.
Yeah, I even, again, I'm based in Dublin and Ireland, but even me from afar could see how popular that guy was, and I remember seeing him on the movie Something About Mary. I'm thinking, what's this guy doing in that, right? So he was pretty much everywhere. So you must have been very impressed with what Conor McGregor's been doing and how he's been actually able to build that up, and kind of what he's brought to the UFC and all his different kind of dealings.
Yeah, so that's another there's some unusual and very interesting stories that we had at SCORE. So I would say we pretty much discovered Conor McGregor in a way. I mean, he obviously was going to do what he did, and become a legend in mixed martial arts. But in terms of social media, we really did in a way discover that he was a hidden gem, because we looked at these signals and we saw that his fan base was just rabid. So we saw that there was a very unusual pattern. So he had extremely high relative engagement. And so at the time when we first partnered with Conor McGregor, he would post something on our platform, and just the engagement was incredible. And it was, and I've said this in a couple other talks, but it was something very minor at the time. Like, maybe he would get 50 likes, right? Which, that's not what you would expect from somebody at his level, right? He's at the global stage now. But at the time, this is only several years ago, he said, and one of the things that we discovered was he really was, I would say, like a blueprint for success. Like, and that we saw that these people that had this really, localized or very highly engaged audience, if we could partner with those people. And then since then, I mean, if you look at the engagement he has on social media, it's just incredible.
Yeah, it's just completely insane. And it's surprising, because he's now gone from being very, very niche to just becoming like The Rock, in terms of so many different people kind of bought into what he's doing or interested in his story, good, bad, or indifferent. And it just kind of, and it brings the dollars, right? Because everyone like him or hate him are kind of interested in his story, right? And that's interesting for all different media.
Well, and I think there's a big takeaway. So he was one of the signals we used in creating this exponential growth pattern that we were able to predict with machine learning. And the things that we noticed, the signals that we captured, were we looked at Twitter engagement, relative engagement, right? So not like how many followers you have, but in relative terms, what percentage of your audience engages with your post. And then also Wikipedia is another one that's very interesting. If you look at Wikipedia, compared to other people, how many people are viewing your site, right? Like how many people are looking at the Conor McGregor page, and we fed all those in to create this prediction model. And I think today, there's some lessons there in that there's a lot of interest now in social influencers, and I think there are people that are getting ripped off because they're engaging with people with, let's say, they have a large audience, but they're not looking at the real signal, which is are people engaged?
Yeah, of course, because that's the thing about websites that go viral. You can get like tens of thousands of millions to go on the websites, but unless they're actually engaging in any of the products, that is just literally water just going through a bucket with a big hole in it, because it's actually irrelevant. It's actually trying to get them hooked or engaged to do it. It's pretty interesting. They don't always correlate. And so then you moved on to Pragmatic AI Labs. Tell us a little about the inspiration behind that, and what was the kind of problem you were looking to solve?
So, like many startups in the Bay Area, Score Sports just ultimately fizzled out, and there was a chance at glory, but for whatever reason, just things happened, didn't work out. After that, I decided that I wanted to do full-time consulting and writing. And so what I've done since then, for last, let's say 2.5 years, is I've done either CTO or like data scientist type consulting to startups. So anything from building a jobs framework for virtual reality, or helping someone create their first machine learning pipeline. Those are the kind of things that I've been focused on. And what's great about doing it from a consulting level is that I get to work on a lot of different projects and focus more on really staying on the cutting edge with technology versus when at least at the time when I was heavily involved in just one company, there's other things that you have to do.
Yeah, and I think there's always the opportunity that when you work in consultancy that you can get so many different inspirations, different ideas. You're never going to be siloed because you're kind of working on the same project, same people all the time. So you get so much creativity, and it's like when I do the podcasts and I run the meetups. Everyone's got such a different perspective on things. You're talking to someone who's got a completely different idea or a problem they're looking to solve. So was that kind of tying into the next question? Was that kind of coming into how the book came about, and how, or you're kind of doing that in parallel to the consulting, because you mentioned that you had a purposeful kind of focus on trying to become more of a writer and kind of share your story, because it's a pretty challenging thing to do both things together. Everyone's got a book in them, they say, but very few people actually go out and do it, right?
Yeah, so this is the second book that I've written, and the first one I wrote was about 10 years ago, and it was basically, we'll just call it like DevOps, right? Like Python DevOps. And this one, one of the reasons why I was interested in writing it was that some of the experience I had as CTO or VP of engineering in the Bay Area, and then also some of the experience I've had in this emerging data science, machine learning trend. And so when I was at SCORE, this is 2013, still, there was a lot of unknowns about machine learning and production. And even today, there's still a lot of unknowns about machine learning and production. And so really what my mindset is in writing this book was to try to demystify not the things that everyone else is talking about, which algorithm do I use, and like, how do I do hyperparameter tuning with deep learning? And there's an unlimited source of information on that. But this is more of, okay, here's a real problem. How do you solve it with machine learning? And then how do you actually get into production and maintain it?
Yeah, and the reality is there's so much talk about the other side of it, but the reality is how is it going to help people day to day, and what solutions are we going to solve to make people's lives better? And that to me is the really important aspect of it. And have you kind of come across any things within deep learning or machine learning where people are genuinely getting a lot of benefits from? Because there's obviously the hype cycle, and there's the fear that the hype will never be realized. What's your kind of take on that?
Yeah, I do. I definitely have an opinion on this. So on one hand, the deep learning trend in particular is interesting in that I would definitely not put myself even close to the level of some of the people that are experts in deep learning, like there's a bunch of them. But there is what's interesting about it is that there's a statistical approach that you could look at with machine learning, right? Where there are many things, or you could call data science and statistics, they are very interchangeable, and it can be very controversial and political, especially in university settings where people get upset about what's data science, what's statistics, what's machine learning. But in general, all the deep learning stuff, my opinion of it, is just a technique, right? So there's no guarantee that technique will even be successful. It's like saying, I have logistic regression and it will always solve all problems. I'm not saying that people are saying this, but there's no guarantee that deep learning will solve a solution. It's just like random forest or logistic regression, or it's just an algorithm, right? I mean, so I think my personal opinion about the deep learning stuff is it's because I have been more involved in it before. Deep learning was the only way to do prediction. That's like there are people, for example, I think now that they completely equate deep learning with data science. Like that's like, oh well, you just do TensorFlow. It's like, well, actually, there's nothing wrong with it, but there's a whole lot you can do with never touching deep learning ever. And so I think that I'm not necessarily worried that there'll be a hype cycle that will blow up or something. I think that the deep learning hype cycle, there's a possibility that could blow up. I mean, but I think that is there a need for doing predictions? Is there a need for doing data science? Is there a need for doing machine learning? And is it going to be around forever? I would say yes. I think just the combination of all the things that are happening, like cloud computing, the advances that are happening every 6 months from the major cloud providers, just some of the accidents that have happened, like Python, it just accidentally became the de facto language for data science. Like there's all these accidents, like the Jupyter notebooks, like there's all these things that I think have created this ecosystem that is definitely will not go away. But it could be different than what people expect. Do I think that people are going to be doing deep learning exclusively and that's what data science will be? No, I think that's just going to be one of many techniques people use. What I think actually, and this it kind of goes into the predicting the future a little bit, is that I think that some of, in a way, again, I could be totally wrong. These are just my hunches that some of the really advanced deep learning, advanced machine learning techniques are going to be completely commoditized. And what's going to happen is that cloud providers like AWS, Google, they're going to write software packages, and they're already doing this, that make it irrelevant to have a PhD in deep learning. What'll happen is that you can run SageMaker, and it will automatically pick their hyperparameter tuning. You don't really even completely need to be an expert on that. You should know something. And what I think will happen is just like other industries where you needed to have, this really PhD level expertise, and there's a brief period of time where that's really important. I think, sure, that will still exist, but it's not going to be like right now. There's this, people are constantly looking for PhD level deep learning. I don't think that's going to be the trend for the next 5 years. Okay. What I think the trend will be is that it will be flattened, and that there'll be a huge section of people, even people you wouldn't expect, like product managers, sales, they're going to be doing types of data science and types of machine learning, and that it will be more democratized versus an elite type of skill.
Yeah, because it's a pretty expensive decision if you're going to create a data science team, right? Because you need to look at the return of investment you're going to get from it, and then look at the journey you need to go, and do you actually have the volume of data to warrant to try to do it? So there's a lot of different decisions to make. The stuff that Microsoft, Amazon, and Google have been bringing out recently is pretty exciting, and obviously AI on the edge. There's so many different things happening. I for one see logistics, drug discovery, as something that AI seems to be really kind of adding some advances to. Have you got any other kind of thoughts that you're kind of seeing on that day to day?
I mean, part of what I'm doing, consulting, writing, and I have more books and I have video series, like all this stuff. Like my complete focus is on this. In the title of the company is the same as Pragmatic is basically not tomorrow, but today. What can you do that's helpful? And I think that will be, I do think that's the future, is that every single industry, it could be a sales organization, it could be like human resources, is that machine learning and AI will actually just become part of what people do. And it just like, people are using Excel spreadsheets or using, some kind of cloud-based email server. It's just going to be part of everybody's workflow. So that's the future I see is a less, at least in the short term, I see a less like Blade Runner kind of thing where there's like all this like really crazy stuff. What I see is that there's going to be a lot of things that normal people will use that will really help their life.
Noah Giff, founder of Pragmatic AI Labs and lecturer at UC Davis, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. For more information, contact mark@alldus.com. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following. AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.